Welcome to my channel, Audio Story House. Subscribe to listen to many stories. Felix often comes to the hospital to work. Today, there's a surgery waiting for him early in the morning. Felix is an internist. As he was getting ready to enter the surgery room, he noticed a commotion in the inpatient department. A group of people were screaming, then doctors, nurses, and patients ran out of their rooms. Calm was quickly restored. Felix walked over to see what had happened. A doctor stood there, having witnessed a heart-wrenching transformation. A young patient, who had suddenly developed a high fever a few days ago and was brought in, was being treated with all possible efforts by the hospital, but the cause remained unidentified. Not only Felix's hospital, but many nearby hospitals had received patients like this. Now, the patient's eyes lost their usual sparkle, replaced by a vacant and frenzied gaze. His skin was pale, and his mouth was smeared with blood, like a monster. He stood up, suddenly emitting an inhuman roar, and pounced on the nearest nurse. His movements were so fast, almost unreactable. He watched the nurse struggle in despair, powerless to help. Other medical staff were also stunned by this sudden change, hesitating for a few seconds. "Grab him," a doctor said, trying to organize people to subdue the monster that was no longer a patient. The bitten nurse quickly mutated, starting to bite the people around her. In the hospital's emergency room, panicked screams and chaotic footsteps intertwined into chaos. "Run!" a nurse's voice sharply pierced through the chaos. "Don't let them get close." The doctor's screams were filled with fear and despair. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Zombies, they've turned into zombies. Everyone run!" For a moment, patients and medical staff were running chaotically in the corridors, with sounds of collisions and falls echoing everywhere. Every corner was filled with terror, and the victims screamed in horror. "Help me!" a patient desperately called out while being attacked. The hospital was filled with painful screams and desperate cries. Felix, following the crowd towards the hospital entrance, grabbed a sharp scalpel from an operating room as he passed. As he burst through the hospital doors, an even more chaotic scene unfolded before him. On the streets, more people had begun to mutate, their eyes vacant, movements mechanical, and mouths smeared with blood, searching for people to consume. The streets had lost all order, everyone was in a panic. Felix, clutching his car keys, ran towards the parking garage. His fingers trembled as he continuously dialed his parents' phone, his anxious heart nearly preventing him from staying calm. Felix's parents ran a supermarket in a residential area, likely getting ready to open for the day. Finally, the call connected, but all that came from the other end was noise. "Dad, Mom. Are you listening? It's very dangerous outside. Don't open the store, lock the doors and windows, I'm coming back." Felix's voice was hurried and firm. On the other end, his father's voice was filled with confusion and anxiety. "Felix? What's happening? We've seen a lot of people running, some with blood on them." "There's no time to explain, Dad. You must listen to me, don't open the store, don't go outside." "I'll come back as soon as I can, but you must ensure your safety now," Felix interrupted. His mother's voice trembled over the phone. "Felix, where are you? Be careful too." Felix clenched his teeth, knowing he had to remain calm. "I'm near the hospital, but it's chaotic here. I'll find a way back as soon as I can, don't go outside." After hanging up, Felix took a deep breath and looked up at the congested entrance to the garage. Car horns blared, and people's terrified screams mingled together. Even reaching his car would be futile, there was no escaping. Felix's gaze was fixed on the chaotic scene, everywhere in disarray. Many were robbing others of their cars and money. Two strong men were trying to pull out a woman who was resisting fiercely. Seeing this, he prepared to help the woman. At that moment, another passerby rushed up and fought with the two men. Without hesitation, Felix charged into the center of the fray. Felix also joined in, grabbing one of the men by the shoulder and forcefully dragging him away from the female driver. The bystander was not to be outdone. striking the other man in the abdomen, causing him to bend over in pain. After a fierce scuffle, the two strong men realized they were no match and wisely gave up, turning to run towards another car and hurriedly fleeing the scene. The female driver, seeing the situation turn in her favor, poked her head out of the window, her face streaked with grateful tears. "Thank you, get in the car, I can take you away from here." As the tension inside the car slightly eased, the three of them began to introduce themselves. "My name is Felix, I'm a doctor at a nearby hospital." Felix's voice was steady, though his heart was still uneasy. The man sitting in the passenger seat nodded. "I'm David, a SWAT officer. Today was supposed to be my day off. I didn't expect to encounter this situation." The female driver smiled slightly, though her smile was tinged with fatigue. Her eyes remained firm. "I'm Molly, a musician. I didn't expect today to turn out like this." After a brief silence in the car, Felix broke the deadlock. "We need a safe place now. My family owns a supermarket. We can go there and meet up with my parents. At least, we can have a temporary haven from the storm." David and Molly looked at each other and nodded. Felix gave Molly directions. Felix asked them, "Where are you from? Are there zombies there too?" Molly, remembering what happened in the morning, was frightened. She said, "I came from the city center, wanted to go to University to find my parents. From afar, I saw the streets were full of people. People were running and biting each other crazily. So, I turned around." Felix somberly said, "That means the city center has fallen." On the street side, a group of oblivious teenagers were graffitiing on the wall, "The end is coming," laughing and joking. David looked at the zombies on the street, wandering aimlessly. But when they smelled the scent of blood, they rushed over. Molly hesitantly said, "Do we really have to stab them in the head? What if they are still human? Am I killing people?" David firmly said, "They are not human. Actually, 2 weeks ago, during a mission, I had already encountered zombies. They were locked in a metal cage, being transported to City A at that time. The transporters said they were infected with a virus. Just didn't expect things to turn out this way." Felix puzzled. 2 weeks ago, wasn't it sent out of the city early? "I witnessed the process of people turning into zombies. The hospital received a person with a high fever, who wouldn't stop having a fever, wouldn't eat, and later started biting people on sight." David frowned. Could it be that the destination was our city? What exactly are they experimenting with? No one knew what exactly had happened. Felix waved his hand. "Forget it, don't think about it." "How is your family?" David sighed. "My parents are not in the city. They are in a remote village in the countryside. I've called many times but no one answers. I don't know how they are." Felix comforted. "Now it's only the city that has zombies. Your parents should be fine. Maybe they're just busy and haven't noticed." David looked outside, worried. When their car stopped near the house, they saw a scene at the supermarket entrance. A group of people gathered there, apparently wanting to break in. The situation looked quite tense. There were no zombies on the street in front of the supermarket, only panicked people. This neighborhood only had this one supermarket, definitely the first place residents would think of. "Looks like we need to find a way to deal with this problem," David said in a low voice, his gaze vigilantly observing the crowd. Felix quickly took out his phone, calling home. "Dad, Mom, are you going to the basement? We need your help now. Get some fireworks for the new year and throw them far away, scare those people away from the door." On the other end of the phone, his father's voice carried a hint of tension. "Okay, son, we'll do it right away. Be careful," Felix instructed, "ensuring your own safety is the most important thing." After hanging up the phone, Felix turned to David and Molly. "My family will try to draw those people away. Once the crowd disperses, follow me to the back door." The sound of firecrackers suddenly erupted, startling the crowd into chaos, with smoke filling the air. More terrifyingly, a few zombies were attracted by the noise, slowly moving toward the crowd. Seeing these horrific creatures, the people who had wanted to break into the supermarket scattered in panic. "Quick!" Felix urged in a low voice, leading David and Molly out of the car, carefully making their way around to the back of the house. Upon reaching the back door, Felix's parents were already waiting there. They looked worried, but relief washed over their faces when they saw Felix unharmed. Come in quickly." Ethan hurriedly opened the door, whispering. The group quickly entered the house, and just as the door was shut, the moaning of zombies and the distant sounds of chaos could be heard outside. Felix's home became their temporary haven. "Dad, Mom, this is David and Molly. They've been a great help to me," Felix introduced. Then to Molly and David, he said, "These are my parents, Ethan and Vera." The parents nodded, and despite the urgency of the situation, they politely welcomed the two new friends. "Thank you for looking after our son." The group sat around the living room, starting to discuss their next steps, knowing all too well that although they were temporarily safe, danger and tomorrow were both uncertain. Felix's parents appeared exceptionally anxious. "What exactly is happening outside?" Ethan asked anxiously. Felix grimly revealed the truth: zombies. The people outside have mutated. The whole city is about to fall into chaos. A silence fell over the room, the air almost seemed to solidify. The father's face paled, and the mother covered her mouth nervously. David took out his phone, glanced at it, and said, "I have no signal." Molly and Felix also checked their phones to find no signal. On the first day of the zombie outbreak, they had lost signal. It was hard not to suspect a man-made conspiracy. Felix's house was a two-story detached building, with a supermarket on the ground floor that served the surrounding residential area, and the living area on the second floor, as well as a spacious basement for storage. There was a fenced backyard accessible through a corridor at the back. The supermarket had enough food and water. For now, they were temporarily safe. "Vera, you and Molly charge all the unsold power banks. We don't know when we might lose electricity," Felix said. David immediately realized the urgency, turning to Ethan, "The supermarket will be coveted by many. Felix and I will go strengthen the defenses. Ethan, do you have wooden boards or something similar? We need to fortify the doors and windows to prevent zombies from breaking in." Ethan quickly responded, "Yes, there are plenty of construction boards and tools in the basement. I'll take you there." Following Ethan, they quickly went down to the basement to start moving boards and tools. The next hours were spent fortifying doors and windows. The sound of hammers and nails hitting the boards was especially loud in the quiet residential area. As night fell, the world was enveloped in a heavy darkness. Felix and David stood in front of a reinforced window, peeking through the gaps outside. Electricity hadn't been cut off yet, some houses still had lights shining through, but more homes were plunged into darkness, with no way to tell if they were still inhabited or had been taken over by zombies. David stared out the window, a gloom settling in his heart. "We've lost signal. We're completely cut off from the outside world." Felix responded softly, "At least we still have electricity, which, under the current circumstances, is already fortunate." "Look at the street," David said with a serious tone. The street offered a chilling sight. Zombies, as if drawn by the night, began to gather on this street. They moved slowly but steadily towards a direction, forming a slowly flowing river of death. Their figures under the dim streetlights were especially terrifying. "It seems they're moving towards a specific place," Felix said quietly, his voice carrying an unnoticeable worry. David joined him, staring out. "Yeah, they seem to be attracted by something. We have to stay vigilant at all times, ensuring our defenses are foolproof." As the first rays of morning light entered the room, Felix and his companions were awakened by the noise from downstairs. They rushed to the window to see a group of people gathered in front of the supermarket, wielding axes, clearly intending to force their way in. "Hurry, break down this door," a gruff voice commanded. The man wielding the axe had a greedy gleam in his eyes. Another person responded mockingly, "This won't stop us." Felix opened the window and shouted down, "This is our place, you better leave." However, his warning seemed to have no effect. The people not only didn't leave but also swung their tools more fiercely. Seeing this, Felix knew he had to act. He quickly grabbed some firecrackers, lit them, and threw them towards the group. The firecrackers exploded in the air, making a deafening noise. Startled by the sudden explosion, the group stopped their actions, and some even stepped back. The sudden loud noise scared the crowd into chaos, and for a moment, they abandoned the idea of attacking the supermarket and hurriedly fled the scene. David stared out the window at the gradually dispersing crowd, a serious expression on his face. This supermarket is too conspicuous, like a magnet attracting trouble. This place will be breached sooner or later. Felix nodded in agreement with David's view. This place was not as safe as he had imagined. Even if they were not attacked by zombies, they would be attacked by people. We need a more reliable plan. David, let's find a truck, load it with the supplies we need, and then park it in the backyard of the house. This way we can be ready to evacuate at any time. Molly also joined the discussion. Indeed, I think you're right. Ethan, after hearing their discussion, was very worried. Are you really going out? It's too dangerous to go out now. Son, we can reinforce the house again. Dad, the supermarket is too noticeable. If we encounter a human bomb, or something like that, we are not their match. Felix could see his parents sitting on the sofa with solemn expressions on their faces. David, holding a pair of binoculars, carefully observed the surroundings. His gaze was sharp, like a hawk searching for prey. Soon, he found the target, a truck parked alone in the middle of the road 2 streets away, looking in good condition. I found a truck over there. David pointed in the direction, his voice low and firm. Felix also looked in that direction. It was just 500 meters up the street. On the main road, a small truck was parked in the middle of the road. They wrapped themselves in wood boards and then wrapped them in clear tape, including the neck and body. The lower body had clear tape wrapped around the trousers. David picked up a sharp watermelon knife found in the supermarket, while Felix held his surgical scalpel that he had been using for years. David instructed Felix, "These zombies are very sensitive to blood and sound, and move slowly. Have you practiced any physical fitness exercises?" David was a police officer, physically strong and powerful. He did not want to lose a teammate on their first mission. "Don't worry, I've practiced Sanda," Felix said proudly. Vera held Felix's hand tightly, her eyes filled with pleading. "Felix, is it really necessary to go out? It's relatively safe here. You're taking such a big risk going outside." Ethan also frowned. Although he tried to maintain a strong appearance, it was not difficult to see the struggle in his eyes. "It's too dangerous outside. You don't know what you'll encounter. If there's another way, it's best not to take this risk." Felix gently touched his mother's hand, his voice steady and firm. "Mom, Dad, I know you're worried, but if we don't find that truck, our situation will be even more dangerous." David also added, "Don't worry, I'll protect Felix. We won't take unnecessary risks and will move as safely as possible." The two exchanged a knowing glance, confirming each other's readiness. Then, like 2 nocturnal cats, they quietly opened the door and stealthily stepped out of the safety of their home. The streets were eerily quiet, with occasional moaning sounds from zombies making the silence even more sinister. Felix and David observed their surroundings nervously, taking each step with utmost care to avoid attracting unwanted attention. The streets were empty, with only 1 or 2 aimless wandering zombies. They held their breath, trying not to make any sound, knowing that these creatures were extremely sensitive to noise. Finally, they reached their destination, their eyes locked on the truck parked in the middle of the road. But their hearts sank at the sight of a zombie sitting in the driver's seat, strapped in by the seatbelt, twisting its body and moaning lowly. Felix signaled David to stay alert with a glance. He then tiptoed to the passenger side, picked up a stone from the roadside, aimed at the window, and smashed it. Glass shards flew everywhere. The zombie was startled by the sudden attack and began to struggle more violently. But Felix didn't hesitate. He quickly took out his surgical scalpel and accurately stabbed it into the zombie's head. The zombie's movements immediately ceased, then relaxed completely. Felix took a deep breath, stabilizing his emotions, then quickly unbuckled the zombie's seatbelt. He opened the door and with a strong kick, ejected the lifeless body out. "Done," Felix said to David, his voice low but determined. They quickly checked the truck to make sure it could start normally. As the sound of breaking glass and the zombie being kicked out of the car attracted nearby zombies, they began to move towards Felix and David's location with slow but steadfast steps. David quickly jumped into the driver's seat, started the truck, and shouted, "Get in the car." Felix, without any hesitation, jumped into the car, slammed the door shut, and David hit the gas, driving the truck away from the spot. But they soon realized that the fuel gauge of the truck was dangerously hovering at the empty warning line, and they needed to find a gas station to refuel as soon as possible. Fortunately, there was a gas station not far away. The station had a few empty cars parked, and blood was everywhere, clearly indicating a struggle had taken place. The truck slowly stopped next to the fuel pump, and Felix and David quickly divided the tasks. Felix was in charge of refueling, while David kept watch for any zombies that might appear. Felix picked up the fuel nozzle and began to refuel the truck, while David vigilantly observed the surroundings, his watermelon knife ready to deal with any sudden dangers. Soon, a few wandering zombies were attracted by the noise and began to approach the gas station. David did not hesitate and went to confront the zombies. With every swing of his watermelon knife, he accurately eliminated a threat. His actions were clean and efficient, and although each confrontation accelerated his heartbeat, he knew he had to protect Felix and their hope of survival. Felix told David, "I'll go to the convenience store of the gas station to look for oil drums." As soon as he opened the door, a zombie rushed out, and Felix swiftly stabbed it in the head. He found 2 oil drums in a corner and quickly filled them up. David stood on the side of the gas station, his eyes cold and determined, the watermelon knife in his hand reflecting the morning sun's light, shimmering with chillness. His gaze was as sharp as a predator's, closely monitoring the slowly approaching zombies. The first zombie staggered over, making a low moaning sound. David did not hesitate for a moment, quickly stepped forward, his body as agile as a cheetah. His movements were smooth and decisive, a knife chopping towards the zombie's neck, the blade sharp, precisely inserted into its brain. The zombie's body instantly lost support and fell to the ground, no longer moving. Then, another zombie appeared in his sight. David turned around, kicked away the closest zombie, and then swiftly swung his knife down. The blade collided with the zombie's head with a dull sound, and the zombie fell to the ground in response. Under David's protection, Felix successfully finished refueling. The two quickly jumped into the truck, and the vehicle started again. As the truck was driving, Molly and Vera were waiting for them in the backyard. Felix and David's truck slowly entered the backyard. The two got out of the vehicle, and Vera quickly approached, seeing the blood on them, thinking they were injured. Felix reassured his mother, "This is not our blood." Felix and David obediently took off their jackets, hanging them behind the door, and then they entered the house. "Are you guys okay? Are you hurt?" Eason nervously checked them over, his gaze filled with concern and care. "We're fine, everything went smoothly," Felix answered, his voice carrying a hint of fatigue but more so relief and gratitude. "We also found the truck, and brought back some gasoline," David added, a hint of pride in his eyes. Felix and David covered the broken windows with transparent acrylic sheets. As evening approached, the sky gradually darkened, and the entire residential area was enveloped in a repressive atmosphere. Suddenly, Felix and his family were interrupted by a desperate scream from outside. This was the 5th day of the zombie outbreak. Today, there were no more panicked passers-by like yesterday. "I can't take it anymore." The voice was filled with extreme pain and despair, followed by a dull thud. Felix and the others immediately ran to the window, witnessing a heart-wrenching scene. A person fell from the height of the 7th floor, and almost the moment they hit the ground, the surrounding zombies, like sharks smelling blood, crazily pounced on the unfortunate figure. At that moment, everyone in the house felt an indescribable shock and horror. Ethan tightly gripped the window frame, his eyes filled with disbelief, while Vera covered her mouth, tears shimmering in her eyes. "This world," Felix muttered, his voice full of sorrow, "under the pressure of the apocalypse, it's the spirit that breaks first. In the age of the apocalypse, surviving is harder than dying. Some people jump from buildings without a word, while others scream in despair before facing death. The incidence of suicide began to increase, many people choosing to give up their lives amidst the panic and despair of the apocalypse. Others stood up to encourage everyone to be strong and not give up on life." When people heard these encouraging words, it was very uplifting. Many people began to hope, believing that one day things would return to normal. But it couldn't stop those who were determined to die. The next morning, as the sky was not yet fully bright, every person in the house began to act. Following the original plan, they loaded up the car with as much supplies as they could carry. Felix's parents, despite their age, also showed a firm determination, helping to move supplies. Molly was not to be outdone, actively organizing food and essentials. A group of people moved most of the daily necessities, food, and water sources to the truck. As they were in the process of moving, a sudden gunshot tore through the quiet of the early morning. This sound froze everyone's actions, and Felix and David immediately became alert, knowing that in this era, any unusual sound could signal the arrival of danger. David whispered, "That's a gunshot, not far from us." Felix remained calm, his voice firm and powerful. "Everyone stay alert. David and I will go upstairs to check the situation." Felix and David quickly ran upstairs, grabbed the binoculars, and went to the window facing the street to watch. David's eyes scanned every corner like radar, trying to locate the source of the gunshot. As Felix's gaze swept across a house not far away, his heart skipped a beat. On the balcony, a group of people were in extreme panic. They raised their hands, their backs against the balcony railing, obviously cornered, stepping back step by step, their emotions looking extremely tense and desperate. Felix quickly signaled David to pay attention to that direction. David immediately adjusted the focus of the binoculars, his gaze tightly locked on the balcony of that house. The two of them almost held their breath, not daring to take their eyes off the binoculars. Felix and David continued to observe the group's every move through the binoculars. Finally, after a long wait, the group slowly retreated back into the house, temporarily disappearing from their sight. Felix turned to David, his eyebrows furrowed, his voice filled with confusion and concern. "What exactly are they doing there?" David took a deep breath, a flash of worry in his eyes. "Maybe they're looting someone else's supplies." In this chaotic end of the world, people can do a lot of desperate things for survival. And our supermarket may soon become their next target. Felix gently patted David on the shoulder. "Keep an eye out. If that group gets close to here, or if there are signs they've discovered us, let me know immediately. We might need to leave here right away." David nodded, his gaze refocused on the binoculars, serious and focused. Felix quietly went downstairs and joined the moving work. While helping, he shared the situation upstairs and his concerns with his parents and Molly. Vera's face grew more worried after hearing this. "The world has become too dangerous. We always have to live in fear." Molly gently comforted Vera's back. "We have David and Felix with us. We will definitely find a safe place." On this apocalyptic morning, everyone was preparing for an unknown future.